No one takes you again. Those 5 words would seal her fate and his. When schoolteacher Beatrice Holloway escaped the Blackwell gang's clutches on a moonless Texas night, she never imagined the weathered cowboy who saved her would become her salvation and her love. This is their story of survival, revenge, and redemption forged in gunfire and starlight. Stay with me until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the world. The gunshot shattered the night like broken glass. Beatrice Holloway's eyes flew open, her heart already hammering before her mind could catch up to the terror. The acrid smell of gun smoke drifted through the canvas wagon cover above her, mixing with the stench of unwashed men and whiskey. Another shot cracked the darkness, followed by drunken laughter that made her skin crawl. She lay perfectly still on the hard wagon bed, her wrists raw and bleeding beneath the iron shackles that bound her hands. Every muscle in her body screamed from 3 days of captivity, 3 days since the Blackwell gang had descended on her wagon train like wolves on wounded deer. 3 days since she'd watched them gun down poor Mr. Henderson, the elderly driver, who'd promised her safe passage to Fort Worth. 3 days of hell. Jed! Jed, you shot the damn bottle right off Cooper's head, someone howled with laughter. Told you I could do it, didn't I? The voice that responded made Beatrice's blood run cold. Jed Blackwell, the leader. The monster who'd looked her up and down with those dead shark eyes and said, "She'll fetch a good price in Mexico, pretty thing like that." She wasn't going to Mexico. She wasn't going to let them sell her like cattle. She'd rather die right here on this godforsaken prairie than suffer that fate. Beatrice shifted slowly, testing the shackles. They'd been tight when they first locked them on. Cooper had made sure of that, grinning with his yellow teeth as he'd squeezed them until she cried out. But 3 days of the wagon's constant jostling, 3 days of her wrists bleeding and swelling, had created just enough space, just enough give. If she could slip her hands through. Another gunshot. More laughter. They were getting drunker, more reckless. She could hear bottles clinking, could picture them gathered around their campfire 20 yards from the wagon. 6 men. All armed. All killers. Her only chance was now while they were distracted, while the moon hadn't yet risen to betray her escape. Beatrice gritted her teeth and pulled. The metal bit into her torn flesh, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. Blood made the shackles slick. She pulled harder, angling her thumb, compressing her hand as small as it would go. The pain was blinding, white hot, but she didn't stop. Her left hand slipped free. She froze, listening. The men were singing now, some filthy trail song that made her cheeks burn. No alarm. They hadn't heard her. The right hand was harder. Sweat poured down her face as she worked at it, twisting, pulling, praying. The rough iron scraped away another layer of skin. She could feel fresh blood running down to her fingertips. Come on, come on. With a final desperate wrench that brought tears to her eyes, her right hand came free. For a moment, Beatrice simply lay there, clutching her bleeding wrists to her chest, breathing hard through her nose. She was loose. After 3 days of captivity, 3 days of terror and degradation, she was loose. Now came the hard part. She crawled to the back of the wagon as slowly as a shadow moving across a wall. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of her torn dress, the creak of the wagon boards beneath her weight, her own ragged breathing. Through a gap in the canvas, she could see the campfire's glow and the silhouettes of her captors. They were passing a bottle, still singing, still oblivious. The wagon's gate wasn't tied. Why would it be their prisoner was shackled? Beatrice eased it open inch by careful inch, then slipped over the edge and dropped to the ground in a crouch. The earth was cold beneath her bare feet. They'd taken her shoes the first day, said she wouldn't need them where she was going. The stones bit into her soles, but she barely noticed. She was beyond the wagon now, beyond their immediate sight. She ran. The prairie stretched before her like a dark ocean, endless and terrifying. She had no idea where she was going, no plan beyond putting distance between herself and those men. Her torn dress caught on sagebrush and mesquite, but she tore it free and kept running. The singing behind her faded. No shouts of alarm. Not yet. The ground was treacherous in the darkness. Rocks turned under her feet. Thorns from prickly pear cacti stabbed her ankles and calves. She stumbled over a prairie dog hole and went down hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment she lay there tasting blood and dirt, wondering if she could get up. Then she heard a shout behind her. "Where is she? Where's the girl? Check the wagon. She's gone. The bitch is gone." Terror gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Beatrice lurched to her feet and ran harder, her lungs burning, her legs trembling. Behind her more shouts, the sound of horses being saddled in haste. They were coming. She ran until her legs gave out, until she collapsed in a dry creek bed and lay gasping like a landed fish. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and indifferent. Somewhere in the distance she could hear horses, could see torches moving across the prairie. They were searching for her, spreading out in a grid. "Please," she whispered to the uncaring sky. "Please, God, help me." But the night offered no answer, and the hoofbeats grew closer. Beatrice forced herself to move, crawling now when she couldn't run, staying low in the creek bed. The sand was soft beneath her hands and knees, easier on her torn feet. She followed the dry watercourse, praying it would lead her somewhere, anywhere but back to that wagon. Hours passed. The moon rose, a thin crescent that gave just enough light to see by. The shouts of her pursuers faded. Had they given up, or were they simply circling, waiting for dawn to track her properly? Her body began to shut down. Exhaustion pulled at her like a physical weight. Every step was agony. Her feet left bloody prints in the sand. She'd torn her dress climbing over rocks, and the night air cut through the thin fabric like knives. She was so thirsty, her tongue felt swollen, her throat like dried leather. When she finally collapsed for the last time, Beatrice didn't think she'd get up again. The creek bed had widened into a small canyon. She crawled behind a boulder and curled into a ball, shivering violently. This was where she would die, she realized with strange clarity. Better here than in a brothel in Mexico, but still she'd been so young, had so much she'd wanted to do. She'd come west to teach school, to make a difference, to build a life. Now she'd be just another forgotten soul lost to the frontier's cruelty. As consciousness faded, she thought she heard hoofbeats again. But she was too tired to care, too tired to run anymore. Let them come. Let it be over. The last thing she remembered before darkness took her was the sound of those hooves stopping nearby and a man's voice saying, "Jesus Christ." When Beatrice woke, the sun was in her face. She jerked awake with a gasp, her body flooding with adrenaline. Where was she? Where were the outlaws? Easy now, easy. The voice was low, rough, but not unkind. Beatrice's eyes focused slowly. She was lying on a bedroll covered with a blanket that smelled of horse and leather. Above her, the morning sky was the color of pearls, and sitting a few feet away, watching her with cautious dark eyes, was a man. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, she guessed, though the lines around his eyes and the gray threading his dark hair suggested a hard life that had aged him beyond his years. He wore a dusty black hat, a faded blue shirt, and leather chaps marked with old stains. A gun belt circled his lean waist. His face was weathered and stern, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and a nose that had been broken at least once. But his eyes weren't cruel. They were watchful, wary, but not cruel. "Who are you?" Beatrice's voice came out as a croak. "Name's Calder Boone." He reached for a canteen beside him and held it out. "You need water. Drink slow." She wanted to snatch it from his hands and drain it, but something in his tone made her heed the warning. She sat up carefully. Everything hurt, and took the canteen with shaking hands. The water was warm but tasted like heaven. She forced herself to sip, though her body screamed for more. "Where did you find me?" she asked between sips. "Dead Tree Canyon, about 2 miles back. Sun was just coming up. Saw you lying there behind that boulder, figured you for dead at first." His gaze traveled over her torn dress, her bloody feet, her raw wrists. His jaw tightened. "Outlaws?" Beatrice nodded, unable to trust her voice. "The Blackwell gang." Her head snapped up. "You know them. Know of them." Something dark flashed across his face. "They've been operating in these parts for near on 3 years now. Stagecoach robberies, cattle rustling worse. Sheriff can't seem to pin them down. They move too fast, cover too much territory." He paused. "What happened?" The memories came flooding back, and Beatrice had to close her eyes against them. "I was traveling to Fort Worth. There was a wagon train, 6 wagons. The Blackwell gang attacked us 4 days ago. They killed Mr. Henderson, our driver, killed others too. took me." Her voice broke. "They said they were taking me to Mexico to sell me." Calder's expression went stone cold. When he
This
spoke,
story
his
was
voice was
posted
quiet,
on the channel
but there
west
was
of
steel
Betrayal.
underneath.
Please do not
Where are
repost it
they
in
now?
any form.
"I don't know. I escaped last night. Ran for hours. They were chasing me, but I think I lost them in the dark." She looked up at him. "Are they still looking for me?" "If they are, they're looking in the wrong place. I covered your trail best I could." He stood a smooth uncoiling of lean muscle. "But we need to get moving. This canyon's too exposed. If they picked up your tracks again, they could find us here." "Where are we going?" "My ranch, the Triple B. It's about 10 miles northwest." He moved to his horse a sturdy bay gelding that stood ground-tied nearby. "Can you ride?" Beatrice tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Her legs wouldn't hold her. 3 days of captivity and a night of desperate flight had drained everything from her. Calder caught her before she fell. His hands were steady and personal. "Guess that answers that." He scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing and lifted her onto his horse. "Hold on to the saddle horn. I'll walk us out." "I'm sorry," Beatrice whispered. "I'm so sorry. Nothing to be sorry for." He took the reins and started leading the horse out of the canyon. "You're alive. That's what matters." They traveled in silence for a while, Calder leading the horse at a steady walk, constantly scanning their surroundings. Beatrice clung to the saddle horn, every step sending jolts of pain through her battered body. But she didn't complain. This man had saved her life. The least she could do was not slow him down more than she already was. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape began to change. The harsh desert scrub gave way to scattered grassland. In the distance, she could see a line of trees that suggested water. Her spirits lifted slightly. Civilization, maybe. "Help Mr. Boone," she ventured. "Just Calder." "Calder? Why are you helping me? I mean, thank you truly, but you don't know me. You could have ridden past." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I don't leave people to die if I can help it. Simple as that." "Is it?" She studied the back of his head, the set of his broad shoulders. "You said you know of the Blackwell gang. Have you had dealings with them before?" His shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "You could say that. What kind of dealings? The kind that taught me what they're capable of." He glanced back at her, and for just a moment she saw something haunted in his eyes. "The kind that taught me to shoot first when I see their sort." Before she could ask more, he stopped abruptly. His hand went to the gun at his hip, his whole body going tense as a drawn bowstring. "What is it?" Beatrice whispered, fear flooding back. "Riders, coming from the east." He pulled the horse behind a cluster of mesquite and drew his revolver. "Stay quiet." Beatrice's heart hammered as she watched 3 horsemen appear on the horizon, moving fast. Even from this distance, she could see the dust trail they kicked up. Were they looking for her? Had the gang picked up their trail? Calder stood motionless as a statue, his gun ready, his eyes tracking the riders. They were heading northwest, not directly toward them, but close enough to be dangerous. Minutes crawled by. The riders grew closer. Beatrice could make out details now, dark hats, rifles across their saddles, the purposeful way they moved. They were searching for something. For her. One of the riders pulled up short and pointed at the ground. He'd seen something. A track, a sign. The 3 men conferred, one dismounted and crouched studying the earth. Beatrice held her breath, praying, begging God that whatever he saw didn't lead them here. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man remounted. The 3 riders turned south and rode off at a gallop. Calder didn't move for another 5 minutes, watching until the riders were just specks in the distance. Only then did he holster his gun and release a slow breath. "That was too close," he muttered. "We need to move faster." He looked up at Beatrice. "Can you hold on if we ride hard?" "I'll manage." He swung up behind her in one fluid motion, his arms coming around her to take the reins. "Then hold tight." The horse leaped into a canter, and Beatrice grabbed the saddle horn with both hands, biting back a cry, as every old injury screamed in protest. Calder's chest was solid against her back, steadying her when she swayed. He smelled of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably masculine. They rode hard for over an hour, stopping only once to let the horse blow. Calder gave Beatrice more water and a piece of dried beef that she forced down despite her queasy stomach. Every moment they stood still, she felt exposed, vulnerable. She kept expecting to hear shouts, gunfire, the thunder of pursuing hooves, but the prairie remained empty and silent around them. "Not much farther," Calder said as he helped her back onto the horse. "Another hour, maybe less." "Will they find your ranch?" "Maybe. Probably." He swung up behind her again. "But they won't take you from it. I promise you that." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why are you doing this? Why risk your life for a stranger?" Calder was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost talking to himself. "Because 3 years ago I didn't help someone when I should have. Because I was too late." His arms tightened slightly around her. "I won't be too late again." Before she could ask what he meant, he urged the horse forward, and conversation became impossible. The sun was past its zenith when they finally crested a rise, and Beatrice saw the Triple B Ranch spread out in the valley below. It wasn't large, a modest house built of weathered wood, a barn, a few outbuildings, and corrals that held maybe a dozen horses. A windmill turned lazily beside a water tank. Beyond the buildings, she could see cattle grazing on grassland that stretched to distant hills. It looked like paradise. "Home," Calder said simply, and there was something in his voice, pride, loneliness, both that made Beatrice's heart ache. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, a dog came running out, a black and white border collie that circled the horse, barking joyfully. "Hush, Scout," Calder ordered, but there was fondness in his tone. The dog immediately quieted, though his tail kept wagging. Calder dismounted and reached up to help Beatrice down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched ground, and he caught her again, steadying her. "I've got you." He lifted her easily and carried her toward the house. "Scout watch." The dog immediately took up a position near the barn, alert and focused. Clearly, this was a command he knew well. The inside of the house was simple but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, a couple of doors that likely led to bedrooms. Everything was worn but cared for, practical rather than decorative. A man's space. Calder carried her to a bed in a small back room and set her down gently. "I'll get you some clean water and bandages for those feet. Got some clothes that might fit you too, belong to someone else." "Thank you," Beatrice whispered. "For everything. I don't even know how to save your thanks." He straightened his expression, unreadable. "You're not safe yet. Not by a long shot." He moved to the door, then paused and looked back at her. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But I meant what I said earlier, and I'll say it plain now, so there's no misunderstanding." His voice was hard as iron, absolute as a vow. "No one takes you again. Not Blackwell, not his gang, not anyone. You're under my protection now, and that means something." His hand rested on the gun at his hip. "They want you back, they'll have to go through me, and I don't go down easy." Then he was gone, leaving Beatrice alone in the small room, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Outside, she could hear him moving around, talking quietly to his horse. Through the window, she watched him unsaddle the bay and turn him into the corral. Every movement was economical, practiced. This was a man who'd lived alone for a long time, who was used to doing everything himself. What had he said? "Because 3 years ago I didn't help someone when I should have." Who had he failed to help, and what did it have to do with the Blackwell gang? Beatrice looked down at her torn dress, her bleeding feet, her raw wrists. She was alive against all odds, free when she'd been certain she'd die in captivity or on that desperate flight through the darkness. And now she was here in the home of a stern stranger who'd made her a promise that sounded like a declaration of war. "No one takes you again." As the adrenaline finally drained from her system, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes grew heavy. The bed beneath her was soft, the room quiet and safe. For the first time in 4 days, she could rest without fear. But even as sleep pulled her under, she heard Calder outside and the metallic sound of a rifle being loaded. He meant what he said. He was preparing for battle. And somehow Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that the Blackwell gang would come. The only question was when. Beatrice woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Boston in her parents' home before they died, before she decided to make the journey west. Then the ache in her body reminded her of everything: the attack, the captivity, the
This
desperate
story was
escape,
posted
and the
on the
cowboy
channel
who'd
west
sworn
of
to protect
Betrayal.
her.
Please do not
Calder.
repost it in any form.
Afternoon sunlight slanted through the window. She'd slept for hours. She sat up slowly, wincing at the protest from every muscle, and noticed that someone had left a basin of clean water on the chair beside the bed, along with bandages, salve, and a neatly folded dress. The dress was simple calico faded from many washings, but clean and mended with careful stitches. It had belonged to a woman, clearly. Someone Calder had cared about enough to keep her things. Beatrice's hands trembled as she washed away the blood and dirt as she dressed her torn feet and wrapped her raw wrists. The water in the basin turned rust-colored. When she finally pulled on the calico dress, it fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the bodice. Whoever had owned it had been slightly taller, slightly fuller in figure. She found a comb on a shelf and worked through the tangles in her dark hair, wincing as she pulled free bits of sage and cactus. When she was as presentable as she could manage, she made her way slowly to the main room, her bandaged feet tender on the wooden floor. Calder stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd removed his hat and gun belt, and in the afternoon light filtering through the windows, she could see the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the breadth of his shoulders under his work shirt. Scout lay near the door, but raised his head when Beatrice entered, tail-thumping once in greeting. "Sit," Calder said without turning around. "Food's almost ready." Beatrice sank into one of the wooden chairs at the table, grateful to be off her feet. She watched as he moved around the kitchen with the easy competence of someone long accustomed to caring for himself. He loaded 2 plates with bacon, beans, and cornbread, then set one in front of her along with a cup of coffee. "It's not fancy," he said, taking the chair across from her. "But it'll give you strength back. It looks wonderful." And it did. Beatrice couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a real meal. She picked up her fork, then paused. "Aren't you going to eat?" "I am eating." He was already working on his own plate, eating with the single-minded focus of a man who viewed food as fuel rather than pleasure. They ate in silence for a while. The food was simple but good, and Beatrice forced herself to eat slowly, even though her stomach demanded more. Outside, she could hear the wind in the cottonwoods, the occasional sound of cattle lowing in the distance. Peaceful sounds, safe sounds. "The dress fits you well enough," Calder said finally, not quite meeting her eyes. "You can keep it. Got no use for it myself." Who did it belong to? The question was too personal, she knew, but she couldn't help asking. His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My mother. She passed 8 years ago. Fire took both my parents, took most of this house too." He gestured around them. "I rebuilt what I could from what was left." "I'm so sorry." It was a long time ago, but the way he said it told her it still hurt. Anyway, she'd be glad to see her things put to use instead of sitting in a trunk. Beatrice looked down at the faded calico, imagining the woman who'd worn it. Who'd built this home, raised a son in this harsh land, only to lose everything to fire? What was she like? Calder was quiet for a moment. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. Then something softened in his face just slightly. "Strong. Had to be living out here. She could shoot as well as my father could break. A horse could doctor a sick calf. But she was gentle, too. Always singing while she worked, always had a kind word." He set his fork down. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said this land needed more teachers, more civilized folk to balance out all the rough." "Is that why you became a rancher, to keep their legacy alive?" "Became a rancher because it's all I know. My father taught me the cattle business from the time I could sit a horse. After they died, I thought about leaving, but..." He looked around the room, and she could see the weight of memory in his eyes. "This is all I have of them, their dream. Couldn't just let it go to dust." "That must be lonely." His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. "Lonely's better than dead." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning she didn't fully understand. Before she could respond, Scout suddenly stood up, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Calder was on his feet instantly, his hand going to where his gun belt would have been. "Stay here," he ordered, crossing to the door where he'd hung his weapons. He buckled the belt on, quickly drew his revolver, and moved to the window. Beatrice's heart hammered. "Is it them?" "Don't know yet." He peered through the gap in the curtain. "Scout quiet." The dog fell silent but remained tense watching the door. The minutes stretched out. Beatrice could hear nothing but her own pulse in her ears and the tick of a clock somewhere in the house. Then Calder relaxed slightly. "It's all right, just Jake Thornton from the neighboring spread." He holstered his gun but kept his hand near it as he opened the door. A grizzled man in his 60s rode up to the porch on a paint horse, his weathered face creased with concern. "Calder, saw some riders pass by my place this morning. 6 of them heavily armed, moving fast. They stopped to water their horses at my creek and asked if I'd seen a woman come through, young dark-haired, wearing a torn dress." His eyes found Beatrice through the open door. "I told them I hadn't seen nobody, but I got a feeling they didn't believe me." "They have reason not to," Calder said. "Jake, this is Miss Beatrice Holloway. Miss Holloway, Jake Thornton. He runs the bar T about 5 miles east of here." Beatrice stood clutching the back of her chair. "They're looking for me, the Blackwell gang. They took me from a wagon train 4 days ago. I escaped last night." Jake's expression went hard. "Blackwell, should have known." He looked at Calder. "You know what you're getting into, taking her in." "I know exactly what I'm getting into. They're going to come here, soon as they figure out where she went. Let them come." "Calder," Jake's voice held warning. "There's 6 of them, maybe more. You can't take on the whole gang alone." "I'm not planning on taking them all at once. I'm planning on making sure they don't take her." Calder's voice was iron. "I told her no one takes her again, and I meant it." Jake studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You're as stubborn as your father was." "All right, I'll ride into town, let Sheriff Davis know what's happening. Maybe he can get a posse together." "Davis is 2 days away at the county seat. Even if he rides back tonight, that's tomorrow at the earliest before he can organize men." "Then you need to hold out till tomorrow night." Jake looked at Beatrice again, his eyes kind despite the worry in them. "Miss, I'm sorry for what happened to you. Blackwell and his boys are the worst kind of vermin. But you picked a good man to run to. Calder here's got more sand than most, and he's about the best shot in 3 counties. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Call me Jake." He touched his hat brim to her, then turned his horse. "I'll be back with the sheriff soon as I can. You hold tight, Calder." "Always do." They watched Jake ride off, his paint kicking up dust on the trail. When he was out of sight, Calder closed the door and turned to Beatrice. "You should know what you're up against," he said quietly. "Jed Blackwell's got 5 men who ride with him regular. Cooper Dutch, Miguel Randall, and a kid they call Slim. Cooper's the fastest gun. Dutch is mean as a snake. Miguel's quiet but deadly with a knife. Randall's the tracker. He's probably the one who's been following your trail. And Slim's young, but he'll kill you just as dead as the others." "How do you know so much about them?" Calder moved to the fireplace and stared into it, his profile hard in the fading light. 3 years ago, they rode through a small settlement about 20 miles from here, a place called Silver Creek. Wasn't much a general store, a boarding house, a few homesteads. They robbed the store, but the owner's daughter tried to stop them. Girl was only 16. His voice went flat, emotionless. "They took her. Her father tried to follow, and they shot him dead in the street." Beatrice felt ice in her veins. "What happened to the girl?" "Her name was Sarah. Sarah Mackenzie." Calder's hands clenched into fists. "She was my cousin, my mother's sister's only child." "Oh, God." "By the time we tracked them down, it was too late. We found her body in a ravine 2 weeks later. His voice broke just slightly, and he stopped. When he continued, his words were hard as stone. "They'd done things to her, then killed her and thrown her away like she was nothing." Beatrice pressed her hand to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. "I tracked Blackwell for 6 months after that," Calder continued. "Nearly caught him twice. But he's smart, and he's got more lives than a cat. Sheriff Davis finally convinced me to give it up, said I was going to get myself killed for nothing, that the law would handle it." He turned to face her, and his eyes were full of old rage and older grief. "But the law hasn't handled it. Blackwell's still out there, still taking what he wants, still destroying lives. So when I saw you in that canyon, when I realized who must have taken you," his jaw worked. "I won't let what happened to Sarah happen to you. I can't." The weight of his words, the pain behind them, made Beatrice's chest tight. She crossed to him slowly, her bandaged feet silent on the floor. I'm so sorry about Sarah, but you can't blame yourself for... I was supposed to ride out to Silver Creek that day, Calder said. Sarah had written me a letter, said she wanted to talk about
This
coming
story
to work
was
here at the
posted
ranch.
on the channel west
She hated
of
working
Betrayal.
in that store,
Please
wanted
do not
to be around
repost
horses.
it in any form.
I was supposed to go see her, but I had a sick calf that needed tending, and I figured I'd go the next day instead. His voice was raw. If I'd gone when I was supposed to, I would have been there when Blackwell rode in. I could have stopped it. You don't know that. They might have killed you too. Better me than her. He looked at Beatrice, and she saw the guilt that had been eating at him for 3 years, the weight he carried every day. She was 16 years old, her whole life ahead of her, and I let her down. You didn't let her down. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have been there. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. But I wasn't. So now I live with that. Every damn day. Beatrice didn't know what to say. What could anyone say to that kind of grief, that kind of guilt? So instead, she did the only thing she could. She reached out and touched his arm just gently, a silent offering of comfort. He went still under her hand, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then he looked down at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something softer, more vulnerable than she'd seen before. You should rest more, he said quietly. You're still weak, and when they come what? What's your plan? My plan is to be ready, to make sure they can't get to you. He moved away from her touch back to the window. There's a cellar under the kitchen. It's where my mother used to store preserves. Got a good heavy door with a bar on the inside. When they come, you're going down there, and you're staying there until it's over. And what will you do? What I have to. You can't fight 6 men alone. Watch me. There was no bravado in his voice, just flat certainty. I've got good position here. High ground, clear fields of fire. The house has thick walls, my father built it to last. I've got ammunition, and I've got motivation. They want you, they're going to have to earn it. Beatrice looked around the house, seeing it with new eyes. The windows were narrow, defensible. The door was solid oak, reinforced with iron. The walls were thick logs, chinked with mud and stone. Calder's father had indeed built this place to last, had built it to withstand the dangers of frontier life. But 6 armed men. Maybe we should run, she said. Keep moving, try to reach a town. On foot, with you barely able to walk, they'd run us down before we made 5 miles. Calder shook his head. No, running's not an option. Our best chance is here where I know the ground, where I can control the fight. You sound like a soldier. I was. Served under Lee during the war. Learned a thing or two about defensive positions. He glanced at her. Learned a thing or two about dying, too. I don't plan on doing that anytime soon, and neither should you. Night was falling fast now, the sky outside turning from blue to purple to black. Calder lit a lamp but kept it low, then went around checking windows, checking doors, loading weapons. He had 2 rifles, a shotgun, and 2 pistols. He checked each one methodically, loading them fully, setting them in strategic positions around the room. You know how to shoot? He asked. I fired a rifle before. My father taught me. Good. He picked up one of the pistols, a Colt 45, and held it out to her. This is yours now. It's loaded. 6 shots. All you have to do is pull back the hammer, aim, and squeeze the trigger. Don't pull it. Squeeze it steady. Understand? Beatrice took the gun with shaking hands. It was heavier than she expected, cold and deadly. I don't know if I can shoot someone. If it's between you and them, you can. His eyes held hers. If they get past me, if they get into that cellar, you use this. Don't hesitate. Don't give them a chance to hurt you. You just shoot, and you keep shooting until they stop moving. The brutal practicality of his words made her shiver, but she nodded. All right. Good girl. He turned back to his preparations, and Beatrice stood there holding the gun, feeling its weight, understanding what it represented. The end of her old life. The teacher from Boston who dreamed of bringing education to the frontier was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd looked death in the face and survived, someone who would kill to stay alive. They ate a cold supper as the darkness deepened outside, more cornbread, some dried apples, water from the well. Neither had much appetite. Calder kept getting up to check the windows, to listen at the door. Scout lay by the hearth, but even the dog seemed tense, his ears constantly swiveling toward sounds in the night. "Tell me about Boston," Calder said suddenly. "Tell me about your life before." The request surprised her. "Why, because I want to know. Because you're more than just someone who needs protecting." He leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes on her face. "Who were you before Blackwell took that away?" Beatrice set down her water cup and thought about that other life, that other self. "I was a school teacher. My parents ran a small private school in Boston. They taught me everything: literature, mathematics, history, languages. When they died 2 years ago, influenza, I inherited the school. But I couldn't keep it running alone, and there were too many memories." She looked down at her hands. "I'd heard that the West needed teachers desperately, that there were children growing up who'd never learned to read, never learned anything beyond what their parents could teach them. So I sold everything, took what money I had, and headed west." "That was brave." "That was foolish," she corrected. "I had romantic notions about the frontier, about bringing civilization to wild places, about making a difference. I thought I was starting a grand adventure." Her voice turned bitter. "Some adventure. You're still alive. The adventure's not over yet. Isn't it? Even if we survive Blackwell? Even if the sheriff comes and arrests them all? What then? I have nothing. My money was in the wagon they burned, my clothes, my books, my teaching supplies, all gone. I can't even get to Fort Worth now. I'm stranded here with nothing but borrowed clothes and borrowed protection." "You've got more than that." Calder's voice was quiet but firm. "You've got yourself. Your education, your courage. That hasn't been taken from you. That can't be taken from you." "Courage?" She laughed without humor. "I was so terrified in that wagon I could barely breathe. I ran blind through the darkness and collapsed in a canyon waiting to die. That's not courage. That's just desperation. Courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and doing what needs doing anyway." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You could have given up. Could have let them take you to Mexico. Could have just accepted your fate. But you didn't. You fought. You escaped. You survived. That's courage, Miss Holloway. Don't let anyone tell you different." The way he looked at her when he said it made something warm unfurl in her chest. She'd been so focused on her terror, her loss, that she hadn't stopped to think about what she'd actually done. She'd escaped armed outlaws. She'd survived a night in the wilderness. She was still here, still fighting. Maybe that was worth something after all. "Call me Beatrice," she said softly. "If we're going to possibly die together, we should probably use first names." A smile ghosted across his stern features there and gone in an instant. "All right then, Beatrice." The way he said her name in that low, rough voice made her pulse quicken. They talked through the evening, sharing pieces of their lives. She told him about Boston, about the school, about her parents, and the life she'd left behind. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope and brand and read the weather, about his parents and the love they'd had for each other, the way his mother would sing while she cooked and his father would sneak up behind her and kiss her neck, making her laugh. "They were happy," Calder said, staring into his coffee cup. "Even with all the hardship, all the work, they were happy. That's rare out here. Hell, that's rare anywhere. Do you think you'll ever have that a family of your own?" He was quiet for a long time. "I thought about it once. There was a girl in town, the baker's daughter. Sweet thing, always smiling. We courted for a while, and I thought maybe—" He shook his head. "But after Sarah died, after I spent 6 months chasing Blackwell, I came back different, harder. The baker's daughter, she wanted the man I'd been, not the man I became. Can't say I blame her." "What happened?" "She married a shopkeeper. They've got 2 kids now. She's happy, I think. Happier than she would have been with me." "You don't know that." "I do." He looked at her directly. "This life living out here, always watching for danger, always ready for the worst, it's no life for most women. It takes someone special to handle it, someone strong." The air between them felt charged, suddenly heavy with unspoken words. Beatrice found she couldn't look away from his eyes, dark as midnight, burning with intensity. The moment was broken by Scout's sudden bark. Calder was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Get to the cellar, now!" "But now, Beatrice." She ran to the kitchen, her heart in her throat. Calder yanked open the trapdoor in the floor, revealing a ladder leading down into darkness. There's a lamp down there, matches on the shelf. Get down and bar the door from inside.
This
Don't
story
open it
was
for anyone
posted
but
on
me.
the channel
If
west
you hear
of
shooting,
Betrayal.
if you hear me fall,
Please
you
do
wait
not
until full
repost it
daylight
in
and
any
then you
form.
run. You understand, you run and you don't look back. Calder, promise me. I promise. Good. He helped her onto the ladder. And Beatrice, you use that gun if you have to, no hesitation. She nodded, too frightened to speak, and climbed down into the cellar. The last thing she saw before he closed the trapdoor was his face set and determined, the face of a man going to war. Then the door shut, plunging her into darkness, and she heard the scrape of something heavy being dragged over it. She was alone in the dark underground with nothing but a gun and her terror for company. Above her she heard Calder's boots on the floor, heard him moving to the window, heard Scout's low growl. Then cutting through the night, a voice called out, a voice she recognized that she would never forget. Calder Boone, I know you're in there, and I know you've got my property. Jed Blackwell had found them. The cellar was cold and smelled of earth and old preserves. Beatrice's hands shook as she found the lamp and matches as she coaxed a flame to life. The weak light pushed back the darkness just enough to show her where she was, a small room carved from the earth shelves lining the walls. Most of them empty now. A few dusty jars remained, their contents long since spoiled. This was her sanctuary, her tomb maybe if things went wrong. She could hear voices above muffled by the floor and whatever Calder had dragged over the trapdoor. Blackwell's voice loud and demanding. Calder's response quieter, harder to make out. Beatrice sank onto the dirt floor, her back against the wall, the pistol clutched in her lap. She'd never felt so helpless in her life. Up there, Calder was facing 6 killers alone, and she was hiding like a frightened child. But what else could she do, rush up there and get herself killed? Get Calder killed, trying to protect her? No. She'd made him a promise. She would stay down here. She would wait. And if the worst happened, if Blackwell's men broke through, she would use the gun. She would not go back to that wagon. She would not be taken to Mexico. She would die first. The voices above grew louder, angrier. She heard Blackwell shouting something about a reward, about how much trouble she'd caused him. Heard Calder's response, too low to make out words, but clear in tone, absolute refusal. Then the first gunshot shattered the night, and Beatrice bit back a scream. The gunshot echoed like thunder, followed by another, then another. Glass shattered above her. Beatrice heard Calder return fire, the deeper boom of his rifle, distinct from the sharper cracks of pistols. Scout was barking furiously, the sound cutting through the chaos. She pressed her hands over her ears, but couldn't block out the sounds of battle. More shots. The splintering of wood, men shouting. The acrid smell of gun smoke filtered down through the floorboards, making her eyes water. "Give her up, Boone!" Blackwell's voice roared. "She ain't worth dying for." Calder's response was another rifle shot. "You're outnumbered. You can't win this." More gunfire. Something heavy hit the floor above her furniture, being overturned for cover, she realized. The battle was inside the house now. They'd breached the door. Beatrice's whole body trembled. She raised the pistol, pointing it at the trapdoor above her finger on the trigger. If that door opened and it wasn't Calder coming through, she would shoot. She would have to. "Scout down!" she heard Calder yell, and then the shotgun's roar filled the house so loud it made her ears ring even through the floor. A man screamed, the sound of a body falling, then silence, terrible and complete. Beatrice held her breath, straining to hear. Was it over? Had they killed Calder? "Cooper's dead, but," someone shouted. "The bastard killed Cooper." "Then kill him." That was Blackwell. "Burn him out if you have to." "The hell with this," another voice said, younger, frightened. "I ain't dying for some woman. I'm out of here." "Slim, you yellow coward, get back here." The sound of hoofbeats retreating. One of them was running. "Let him go," Blackwell snarled. "4 of us is plenty." 4 against 1 now. The odds were still impossible. More shots rang out, a fierce exchange that seemed to last forever. Beatrice heard glass-breaking bullets thudding into wood. She heard Calder grunt in pain. Had he been hit? Then Blackwell's voice, closer now, right above the cellar. "I know she's here somewhere, Boone. You got her hidden in this house. Maybe I should just burn the whole place down, smoke you both out like rats." You take one step toward that fireplace with a torch, and I'll put a bullet through your brain. Calder's voice was ragged but steady. He was still fighting. You're bleeding, Cowboy. I can see it from here. How long you think you can keep this up? Long enough. Beatrice's heart clenched. He was wounded. She should go up there, should help him somehow, but she'd promised. She'd promised to stay down here to stay safe. Tell you what, Blackwell said, and she could hear the cruel smile in his voice. You give me the girl, and I'll let you live. You've got my word on that. Your word ain't worth spit. Maybe not. But you ain't got a lot of choices here. You're hurt. You're running low on ammunition, and sunrise is still hours away. Your neighbor might bring help, but that help ain't coming tonight. It's just you against 4 of us, and we got all the time in the world. Silence. Then Calder said, even if I wanted to give her to you, which I don't, she ain't here. Sent her off with Jake Thornton hours ago. She's halfway to town by now. Blackwell laughed a sound like breaking glass. Now that's a lie if I ever heard one. Jake Thornton rode out alone. I had Miguel follow him to make sure. And there ain't no tracks leading away from this place except his, so she's here, Boone. Question is where? Beatrice's hands tightened on the pistol. They knew. They knew she was in the house somewhere. Maybe she's in the barn. Someone suggested Dutch, she thought. Then go check. Footsteps crossing the floor above. The door opening and closing. Beatrice's pulse hammered in her throat. If they searched the barn, would they come back and search the house more thoroughly? Would they find the cellar? Minutes passed like hours. Then the door opened again. Barn's empty, just horses and hay. Then she's in this house. Blackwell's voice was certain now. And there's only so many places to hide. Dutch, you and Miguel start tearing this place apart. Look for trapdoors, hidden rooms, anywhere a woman could hide. Randall, you keep our friend here covered. He moves, you shoot him. With pleasure. The sound of furniture being moved. Drawers being yanked open and emptied. Boots stomping across floorboards, testing for hollow sounds. They were searching systematically, methodically. It was only a matter of time before they found the cellar entrance. Beatrice looked around desperately. There was no other way out. The cellar had been carved directly into the earth-solid walls on all sides, the only exit the trapdoor above. She was trapped. She could hear them getting closer. One of them was in the kitchen now, right above her. What's this? Dutch's voice. Something's been dragged across the floor here. Fresh scrape marks. Move it. The sound of something heavy being shoved aside. The table, she realized. Calder had dragged the kitchen table over the trapdoor. Well, well, what do we have here? Blackwell's voice was thick with satisfaction. Looks like a cellar door, boys. Beatrice raised the pistol with both hands, aiming at the trapdoor, her whole body shaking. This was it. They'd found her. Open it up. What if she's got a gun? Then you better duck. Blackwell laughed. Go on, Dutch. Ladies first. Beatrice heard the bar being lifted, saw the trapdoor start to open, spilling lantern light down into her sanctuary. She squeezed the trigger. The gun bucked in her hands, the shot deafening in the confined space. She heard a man yell, heard the trapdoor slam shut again. Had she hit him, she didn't know. The bitch shot me, Dutch roared. Shot me in the damn shoulder. Well, now we know she's down there. Blackwell sounded amused. And we know she's armed. This just got interesting. Above the voices, Beatrice heard other sounds, a scuffle, Calder grunting another gunshot. What was happening up there? I said don't move. That was Randall. Go to hell, Calder growled. And then there was a crash, the sound of bodies hitting the floor, men struggling. Randall, get control of him. More sounds of fighting. Then Calder's voice, strained with pain but fierce. Beatrice, don't come up. Whatever happens, don't. His words were cut off by the meaty thud of something hitting flesh. Beatrice heard Calder hit the floor hard. That's enough out of you, Blackwell's voice. Miguel, tie him up. We're done playing games. No, 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 no. Beatrice's mind raced. They had Calder now. They could torture him, kill him, do whatever they wanted to make her come out. And she would. God help her, she knew she would. She couldn't listen to him suffer because of her. But maybe that's exactly what they wanted. She forced herself to think past the panic. She still had 5 shots. The cellar had a low ceiling. Anyone coming down that ladder would be at a severe disadvantage. She could hold them off at least for a while. But then what? They'd just wait her out, or burn the house down like Blackwell had threatened. She'd suffocate or burn alive.
This story
down here.
was posted on the channel
Miss
west
Holloway.
of Betrayal.
Blackwell
Please do
called
not
down
repost
in a
it
mockingly
in any
polite
form.
tone. I know you can hear me. So here's how this is going to work. You've got exactly 1 minute to climb up out of that hole and surrender yourself. If you don't, I'm going to start cutting pieces off your friend here. I'll start with his ears, then his fingers. I'll make him scream until you can't stand it anymore. And in the end, you'll come up anyway, but by then he'll be dead and his blood will be on your hands. He paused. Clock's ticking, sweetheart. Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. What choice did she have? She couldn't let them torture Calder, couldn't let him die for her. But if she went up, Calder's sacrifice would be for nothing. They'd have her. They'd take her to Mexico, and everything he'd fought for, everything he'd promised, would be meaningless. 30 seconds, Miss Holloway, and I'm a man of my word. Your friend here is going to suffer like you can't imagine. She heard Calder's voice, weak but defiant. Don't do it, Beatrice. Don't you dare. The sound of a fist hitting flesh silenced him. Time's up. Blackwell's voice went cold. Miguel, hold him down. Dutch, give me your knife despite that shoulder. Let's start with the left ear. No, Beatrice screamed. Stop, I'm coming up. Now that's more like it. Blackwell sounded pleased. But just so we're clear, you come up unarmed. You throw that pistol down the hole nice and easy. Then you climb up slow hands where we can see them. You try anything cute, and I shoot your cowboy friend in the head. Understand? Beatrice looked at the pistol in her shaking hands. It was her only protection, her only chance. But what good would it do against 4 armed men, and if she didn't surrender, they'd kill Calder anyway? She'd already lost. I understand, she said, her voice breaking. Good girl, now drop the gun. Beatrice set the pistol on the ground, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped it. This was wrong. Everything in her screamed that this was wrong. But what choice did she have? She started toward the ladder, each step feeling like walking to her execution. She just put her foot on the bottom rung when she heard it hoofbeats. Multiple horses coming fast. What the hell's like Outlaws? Di chapovatas, Blackwell said above. The hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied by shouts. Beatrice froze on the ladder, hope and terror warring in her chest. It's the sheriff, someone yelled outside. Sheriff Davis and at least a dozen men. How did they... Blackwell's voice was sharp with panic. We watched the roads. Must have come cross-country. They're surrounding the house. Blackwell. A new voice boomed from outside, authoritative and commanding. This is Sheriff Davis. You and your men are surrounded. Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up. For a moment, silence reigned inside the house. Then Blackwell snarled, The hell with that. We've got hostages. Tell him Randall. We got Calder Boone and a woman in here, Sheriff, Randall shouted. You try to come in, we kill them both. The sheriff's response was immediate. You harm those people and I'll see every last one of you hang. There's no way out, Blackwell. You're done. Beatrice heard urgent whispered conversation above the outlaws arguing among themselves. Should they fight, run, surrender? She could hear the panic in their voices. They hadn't expected the law to arrive so fast. We need horses, Blackwell said. Dutch, you and Miguel get to the barn saddle up our mounts. We'll use the hostages as shields right out. I don't think so. Calder's voice strained but fierce. The sound of a struggle. Gunshots closed inside the house. Men shouting. Something crashed to the floor. Beatrice scrambled back down the ladder and grabbed the pistol, her heart racing. What was happening up there? More shots. The distinctive boom of the sheriff's rifle from outside. Glass shattering. Men cursing, shouting orders that contradicted each other. Chaos. Then silence, sudden and complete. Calder, the sheriff's voice called. Calder Boone, you alive in there? A pause that stretched forever. Then, I'm alive, Tom, wounded but alive. The woman, she's safe, in the cellar. What about Blackwell and his men? Blackwell's down. Dead, I think. Dutch and Miguel ran for the barn. Randall's here unconscious or dead, can't tell which. Dutch and Miguel just tried to ride out the back, the sheriff said. My men cut them down. It's over, Calder. It's over. Beatrice stood at the bottom of the ladder, the pistol hanging loose in her hand, tears streaming down her face. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. Beatrice, Calder's voice calling down to her. You can come up now. It's safe. She climbed the ladder on shaking legs. When she emerged from the cellar, the scene that greeted her was carnage. The house was destroyed furniture, overturned windows, shattered bullet holes in the walls. Blood pooled on the floor. Blackwell lay face down near the fireplace, very still. Randall was slumped against the wall alive, but barely holding his bleeding stomach. And Calder. Calder sat on the floor near the door, his back against the wall, his left arm hanging useless at his side, blood soaking through his shirt. His face was battered and pale, but his dark eyes found hers immediately. You're all right, yeah, he said, and the relief in his voice made her chest tight. You're hurt. She ran to him, dropping to her knees beside him. The wound was in his shoulder, still bleeding steadily. I've had worse. He managed a weak smile. You did good staying down there, keeping yourself safe. I almost came up when they threatened to hurt you. But you didn't. You stayed smart. His good hand found hers, squeezed it. I'm proud of you. The door burst open and Sheriff Davis strode in, a lean man in his 50s with a thick mustache and sharp eyes that took in the scene instantly. Behind him came his deputies, guns drawn, checking the bodies. Sweet Jesus, the sheriff breathed. Calder, you took on the whole Blackwell gang by yourself. Wasn't by myself. Miss Holloway shot Dutch when he tried to get her. The sheriff's eyes found Beatrice, and something softened in his expression. Miss, are you hurt? No, scared, but not hurt. She kept holding Calder's hand, unable to let go. He saved my life, multiple times. That sounds like Calder. The sheriff knelt beside them, examining Calder's shoulder with practiced efficiency. Bullet went clean through. You'll live, but you need a doctor. Jim, he called to one of his deputies. Ride back to town. Get Doc Matthews out here fast. Yes, sir. As the deputy hurried out, the sheriff turned his attention back to Beatrice. Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Tom Davis. Jake Thornton rode into town about 6 hours ago, said you'd been taken by the Blackwell gang and that Calder was protecting you out here. I rounded up every able-bodied man I could find, and we rode out cross-country soon as we could. Looks like we got here just in time. Just in time? Beatrice agreed, her voice shaking. They were about to, they said they'd hurt him if I didn't surrender. But you didn't. I was going to. I couldn't let them torture him. But then you arrived. The sheriff nodded slowly, respect in his eyes. That took courage, ma'am. More courage than most folks have. He stood. Deputies, get these bodies out of here. Check the barn for any more of Blackwell's gang. I want a full accounting. As the men moved to obey, Beatrice helped Calder shift into a more comfortable position, wadding up a cloth from the kitchen and pressing it against his wound to slow the bleeding. He winced, but didn't complain. You should have let them have me, she said softly. You shouldn't have risked your life. Yes, I should have. His eyes held hers, intense despite his pain. I told you no one takes you again. I meant it. But you almost died. Almost doesn't count. His mouth quirked. Besides, I'm too stubborn to die. My mother always said so. Despite everything, Beatrice felt a laugh bubble up, half sob, half hysteria. You're impossible. So I've been told. The sheriff returned satisfaction on his weathered face. Found 2 more of Blackwell's men in the barn, both dead. That's the whole gang accounted for, except for someone named Slim, who apparently ran off during the fight. We'll track him down. He looked at the destruction around them. Hell of a battle you fought here, Calder. When folks hear about this, you'll be a legend. Don't want to be a legend. Just want to be left alone. Too late for that, I'm afraid. The sheriff's expression sobered. Miss Holloway, I'll need you to give a statement about what happened. The ambush on the wagon train, your captivity, everything. But that can wait until you've had some rest and Doc Matthews has looked you over. The wagon train, Beatrice said, sudden grief washing over her. Mr. Henderson, the others, they're still out there. We'll organize a burial party tomorrow, the sheriff promised. Make sure they're laid to rest proper. He paused. I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Henderson was a good man. He tried to protect me. They killed him for it. Then we'll make sure his death mattered. Blackwell and his gang won't hurt anyone else ever again. That's something. It was something. But it didn't bring Mr. Henderson back. Didn't undo the terror, the violence, the horror of the past 4 days. As if
This
reading her
story was
thoughts,
posted on the
Calder's
channel
hand
west
squeezed
of
hers
Betrayal.
again.
Please do not
You
repost
survived,
it in any
He
form.
said quietly. That's what matters. You survived, and now you get to keep living. She looked at his battered face, at the blood soaking his shirt, at the strength and determination that burned in his eyes despite his wounds. This man had fought 6 killers for her, had been willing to die to keep her safe, and he'd asked nothing in return except that she stay alive. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay. Don't need repayment, just need you to be all right. His eyes searched hers. Are you all right? Was she Beatrice? Didn't know. She was alive, yes. Free, yes. But she'd seen men die tonight, had shot a man herself, had come within moments of being recaptured by the monsters who'd taken everything from her. I will be, she said finally. Eventually. I think. That's all anyone can ask. The doctor arrived within the hour, a gruff elderly man with gentle hands who cleaned and bandaged Calder's wound while muttering about foolish cowboys who fought whole gangs single-handed. He examined Beatrice who treated her torn feet, and raw wrists gave her a sleeping draught that she refused to take. I'm fine, she insisted. Treat the others first. But there were no others to treat. Randall died before the doctor could get to him. The rest of Blackwell's gang was already dead. Only Calder needed medical attention, and even he tried to wave it off until the sheriff ordered him to sit still and let the doctor work. As dawn broke over the Triple B ranch painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the sheriff and his men prepared to head back to town with the bodies. They'd load them onto a wagon, take them in for formal identification and burial in the Potter's Field, where criminals were laid to rest. Miss Holloway, you're welcome to ride back with us, Sheriff Davis offered. We can get you settled in town, find you a place to stay while you figure out your next steps. Beatrice looked at Calder, who sat in a chair by the fireplace, his arm in a sling, his face pale but composed. He'd defended her without hesitation, had risked everything for a stranger, and now she was supposed to just leave. Go back to town and start over as if nothing had happened. If it's all the same to you, Sheriff, I'd like to stay here a bit longer, she said. Calder's hurt because of me. The least I can do is help him recover. The sheriff glanced between them, something knowing in his eyes. That's so. Well, if Calder's agreeable, I'm agreeable, Calder said immediately. His eyes met Beatrice's. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. Then it's settled. The sheriff tipped his hat. I'll be back in a few days to get those statements and check on how you're healing. Meantime, you take care of each other. He paused at the door. And Calder Sarah would be proud of what you did here. You know that, don't you? Calder's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Thanks, Tom. When the sheriff and his men had gone, taking the bodies and the violence with them, the ranch fell quiet. Scout, who'd been hiding in the barn during the aftermath, came slinking back to flop down by Calder's feet with a contented sigh. Beatrice looked around at the destroyed house. Broken furniture, shattered windows, blood on the floor. The marks of battle everywhere. This is going to take a lot of work to fix, she said. I've rebuilt before. I can do it again. Not alone, though. Not with that shoulder. She rolled up her sleeves. Where do we start? Calder stared at her. You don't have to, I know I don't have to. I want to. She met his gaze steadily. You fought for me. Now let me help you rebuild what was destroyed protecting me. It's only fair. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then something in his expression shifted, softened, became almost vulnerable. All right then, we start by cleaning up the blood and glass. Then we board up the broken windows until we can get new glass. Then we fix the door patch. The bullet holes replace what furniture got busted. He paused. It'll take weeks. Then I guess I'll be here for weeks. Beatrice, he struggled with whatever he wanted to say. You don't owe me anything. You understand that what I did because it was right. Not because I expected something in return. I know, but I'm not staying out of obligation. She couldn't quite meet his eyes as she said it. I'm staying because I want to. Because in the past day, you've shown me more kindness, more courage, more basic human decency than anyone else in my life. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing, someone worth... She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Worth what? His voice was quiet, careful. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility, with the weight of what they'd survived together and what might come next. Outside, the morning birds were singing. Inside, surrounded by the debris of battle, two people who'd been strangers less than 24 hours ago looked at each other and saw the beginning of something neither had expected. I'd like that too, Calder said finally. Finding out, I mean. Beatrice smiled the first genuine smile since before the wagon train attack. Then I guess we have something to look forward to. Guess we do. They started cleaning up together, working in companionable silence. Every time Calder tried to do too much with his injured arm, Beatrice gently redirected him to lighter tasks. Every time she reached too high or strained herself, he was there to help. They moved around each other with an ease that felt strange and right, at the same time like dancers learning a new rhythm. By afternoon, they'd made good progress. The blood was scrubbed clean, the glass swept up the worst of the damage assessed and cataloged. Beatrice found fabric in Mrs. Boone's old trunk and fashioned crude curtains to cover the broken windows. Calder, working one-handed, managed to fix the broken table leg and right the overturned chairs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch, they sat together on the porch, too tired to do more. Scout lay between them, content. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, unconcerned with the drama that had unfolded in the house behind them. It's beautiful here, Beatrice said, watching the sky turn gold and crimson. Harsh, but beautiful. That's the frontier for you. It takes more than it gives usually. But what it does give, Calder trailed off, looking out at his land with something like love in his eyes. It's worth fighting for. Is that why you stayed after your parents died? Partly, but also because I didn't know anywhere else to go. This is home. Only home I've ever known. He glanced at her. What about you? Where will you go when you leave here? I don't know. It was the honest truth. Fort Worth was supposed to be my destination, but I don't know if that's right anymore. After everything that's happened, I'm not sure I'm the same person who started that journey. You're not. Nobody could be. Then who am I now? The question came out smaller than she intended, almost frightened. Calder was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his words were careful, thoughtful. You're someone who survived the worst thing that could happen and came out the other side. You're someone brave enough to shoot a man to save her own life. Someone strong enough to help rebuild even when you're hurting yourself. He looked at her directly. You're someone I'm glad to know. The simplicity of it, the sincerity made Beatrice's throat tight with emotion. I'm glad to know you too. Even though the circumstances were terrible, even though we both nearly died, I'm glad our paths crossed. So am I. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tomorrow they'd continue repairing the damage. The day after, the sheriff would return for their statements. Eventually, Beatrice would have to decide what to do next, where to go, how to rebuild a life that had been so thoroughly shattered. But tonight, sitting on this porch, with this quiet, brave man and his loyal dog watching the Texas sky turn to velvet, Beatrice felt something she hadn't felt in days. Peace and possibility. 3 days after the battle, Sheriff Davis returned as promised. He rode up to the ranch in mid-morning, accompanied by a deputy Beatrice hadn't seen before, a young man with earnest eyes who couldn't have been more than 25. They dismounted near the newly repaired porch, and the sheriff's eyebrows rose as he took in the changes. You've been busy, he observed, noting the patched bullet holes, the new glass in 2 of the windows, the freshly painted door frame. Couldn't just sit around, Calder said, emerging from the house. His arm was still in a sling, but he moved with more strength than he had 3 days ago. Beatrice has been helping. Miss Holloway's still here, then? The sheriff's tone was carefully neutral, but Beatrice caught the speculation in his eyes as she appeared in the doorway behind Calder. I'm still here, she confirmed. Someone needed to make sure he didn't tear his stitches doing foolish things. Smart woman. The sheriff smiled. Speaking of which, I need those statements from both of you. Deputy Morrison here will write everything down official-like. Best we do it separate, though. Get each version clear. They spent the next 2 hours recounting everything Beatrice describing the wagon train attack, her captivity, her escape, and everything that had followed. Calder giving his account of finding her, bringing her back to the ranch, and the siege that had nearly killed them both.
This
The
story
young
was
deputy
posted
wrote
on the channel
furiously
west of
occasionally, asking
Betrayal.
for clarification.
Please do not
His face
repost
growing
it in
more
any
shocked
form.
as the full scope of the horror became clear. When they were finished, Sheriff Davis reviewed both statements carefully, then nodded in satisfaction. This is good. Real good. Judge Mason will want to see these when he comes through next month. There'll be an inquest into the deaths, but it's just a formality. This was clearly self-defense, and you both saved each other's lives. He folded the papers carefully. Far as the law's concerned, you did everything right. What about the one who got away? Beatrice asked. Slim. Haven't found him yet, but we will. He's young and stupid, probably scared out of his mind. He'll make a mistake, and when he does, we'll be waiting. The sheriff stood tucking the statements into his saddlebag. Meantime, I wanted you both to know the whole town's talking about what happened here. Blackwell's been terrorizing these parts for 3 years, and you two finally ended it. Folks are grateful. Don't want gratitude, Calder muttered. Just want to be left alone. I know, but you're a hero now, whether you like it or not. Both of you. The sheriff's gaze moved between them. Town's taking up a collection for Miss Holloway, too, since she lost everything in the attack. Should have a decent sum together by week's end. Beatrice's eyes widened. That's incredibly kind, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity, ma'am. It's neighbors helping neighbors. That's how we survive out here. He tipped his hat. I'll be back next week with the money. You can decide then what you want to do with it. After the sheriff and his deputy left, Beatrice and Calder stood on the porch, watching them disappear down the trail. The morning was bright and clear, the kind of day that made you forget violence existed in the world. A collection, Beatrice said softly. I don't even know these people. They know you, though, or they know what you survived. Calder leaned against the porch rail, favoring his injured shoulder. That means something to folks out here. Means you're tough enough to belong. Do I belong, though? She looked at him. This isn't my world, Calder. I'm a city girl playing at frontier life. Eventually, I'll have to face reality and figure out where I actually fit. And where's that? I don't know. The admission hurt. I thought I knew when I left Boston. Thought I had it all figured out. But now, she gestured helplessly. Everything I planned for is gone. The teaching position in Fort Worth might not even exist anymore. And even if it does, I'm not sure I'm the right person for it. How do I stand in front of children and teach them about civilization when I've seen what I've seen, when I've done what I've done? Calder was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed off the rail and faced her directly. You teach them because of what you've seen. You teach them that surviving doesn't make you less, that fighting back doesn't make you wrong, that this world is hard and cruel sometimes, but there's still beauty in it, still worth in trying to make it better. His dark eyes held hers. You teach them because someone needs to, and you've got the strength to do it. You have a lot of faith in me. I've earned the right to. Watched you face down death twice now and come out fighting. He smiled slightly. Besides, you fixed my table and patched my windows. Anyone who can do that while recovering from what you went through has more strength than most. Despite everything, Beatrice laughed. Your standards for strength are very domestic. Domestic's important. Takes a different kind of courage to build than to fight. The words hung between them weighted with meaning. Building versus fighting. Staying versus leaving. The future neither of them wanted to name, but both could feel approaching. I should check on the horses, Calder said, finally breaking the moment. You want to come? Yes. They walked to the barn together, Scout bounding ahead of them. Inside, the horses nickered and greeting Calder's bay gelding and 3 other horses that had belonged to the Blackwell gang. The sheriff had left them at the ranch, said they were rightfully Calder's now, as recompense for the damage to his property. You ever think about what you'd do with more land? Beatrice asked as she helped Calder fork hay into the stalls. Jake Thornton mentioned the Bar T is 5 miles east. That's a lot of empty space between. Thought about it, but working this place alone is about all I can handle. More land means more cattle, more fence to fix more water to manage. Would need help. You could hire hands. Could, but I like my privacy. He glanced at her. Though I'm finding it's not so bad having company. The right kind of company, anyway? Beatrice felt heat rise to her cheeks and focused intently on the hay. The right kind being the kind that doesn't try to kill you. The kind that fixes tables and argues with me about whether I should be using my bad arm. His voice was warm with something she was afraid to name. The kind that makes good coffee and doesn't mind when Scout tracks mud in the house. Scout tracked mud in this morning, and I definitely minded. But you cleaned it up and didn't complain. I complained to Scout. Extensively. Calder's laugh was low and genuine, a sound she was learning to treasure because it came so rarely. He's thoroughly chastised, I'm sure. They worked in easy silence for a while, the kind of companionable quiet that only came when two people were comfortable with each other. Beatrice found herself watching Calder from the corner of her eye, the way he moved despite his injury, the careful competence in everything he did, the gentleness with which he handled the horses. This was a good man, she realized, not perfect, not without his demons and his grief, but fundamentally decent in a way that was rare anywhere, and especially rare out here where survival often demanded hardness. Calder, she said suddenly, when the sheriff comes back with that money, what if I don't leave right away? He went very still. What do you mean? I mean, what if I stayed longer? Not forever, but longer. You need help around here while your shoulder heals, and I need time to figure out what comes next. We could help each other. Beatrice. He set down the pitchfork and turned to face her. You need to understand what you'd be saying yes to. This ranch is isolated. Nearest town is a hard half-day's ride. Winter's coming in a few months, and when it does, we might not see another soul for weeks at a time. It's lonely work, hard work, and there's no guarantee things won't get dangerous again. I know all that. Do you because staying here isn't like visiting. It's not like playing at Frontier Life. It's the real thing day after day with no escape when it gets difficult. I'm not afraid of difficult. I'm afraid of going back to Fort Worth and pretending to be someone I'm not anymore. She stepped closer to him. I'm afraid of leaving here and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd stayed. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Calder's jaw worked as he struggled with something internal. Some battle between what he wanted and what he thought was right. You barely know me, he said finally. I know you saved my life. I know you're honorable and brave and kind. I know you make terrible coffee but excellent cornbread. I know you talk to your horses when you think no one's listening, and you still grieve for your cousin 3 years later, and you rebuilt this entire ranch from ashes because you couldn't bear to let your parents' dream die. She held his gaze. That's not barely knowing you, Calder. That's knowing the important things. And what about Boston? Your old life. There is no old life. My parents are dead, the school is sold, I have nothing there but memories, and most of those hurt too much to revisit. She took a breath. Maybe that's why I came west in the first place. Maybe part of me knew I needed to become someone new, someone stronger. You were always strong. You just didn't know it yet. The way he looked at her when he said it made her breath catch. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something warm and wanting and terrified all at once. Stay, he said quietly. Stay as long as you need. Stay until you're sure what you want to do next. I'd like that. So would I. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Scout barked from outside and the spell broke. They both laughed a little shakily and returned to work. But something had changed. Some invisible line had been crossed. They both felt it in the way they moved around each other now, hyper-aware of proximity, of accidental touches of glances that lasted a heartbeat too long. That evening, Beatrice cooked supper beans and salt pork and biscuits made from the last of the flour. They needed supplies, she realized. Needed to make a trip to town soon. But neither of them mentioned it. Neither wanted to break the fragile peace that had settled over the ranch. Tell me about your parents, Calder said as they ate. Your real parents, not the school they ran. What were they like? Beatrice smiled at the memory. My father was quiet, thoughtful. Always reading. He could quote Shakespeare and Homer by heart, could discuss philosophy for hours. But he was also practical. He taught mathematics and could fix anything mechanical. My mother was his opposite in some ways, loud, passionate, always laughing. She taught literature and history, and she made every lesson an adventure. Students loved her. They sound remarkable. They were. They believed education could change the world. That knowledge was the great equalizer.
This
Her
story was
smile
posted
faded.
on the channel west
The
of
influenza
Betrayal.
took them
Please
within
do not
days of each
repost
other.
it in any form.
My father went first, and my mother just gave up. She couldn't imagine life without him. That's a deep kind of love. It is. I used to think it was beautiful, romantic. Now I'm not sure. Is it love if you can't survive without the other person? Or is it dependency? Calder considered this. Maybe it's both. Maybe when you've been with someone that long, built a whole life together, they become part of who you are. Losing them is like losing a limb. You can survive, but you're not whole anymore. Is that how you felt after Sarah died? He was quiet for a long moment. Sarah was my family, but not like that. Losing her was rage and guilt more than grief. Rage at Blackwell, guilt that I didn't protect her. He met Beatrice's eyes. But my parents, that was different. When they died, I lost my foundation, lost the people who'd made me who I was. For a long time after, I just drifted. Went through the motions of living without really being alive. What changed? Time mostly. Work. The ranch needed me, the cattle needed tending, and I couldn't just let everything fall apart. So I kept going day by day until one morning I woke up and realized I wanted to keep going, not just for them, but for me. And now I have something I didn't have before. He looked at her steadily, hoped that the future might be more than just survival. Beatrice's heart hammered in her chest. The words felt like a confession, like something precious being offered with no guarantee of acceptance. I have that too, she said softly. For the first time since my parents died, I have hope. They finished supper in charged silence, the air thick with things unsaid. When Beatrice stood to clear the dishes, Calder's hand caught her wrist gently, his right hand the uninjured one. Leave them, he said. Come outside with me. She followed him onto the porch. The night was clear and cool, the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. Calder leaned against the rail looking out at his land, and Beatrice stood beside him. I need to tell you something, he said finally, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. All right. He took a breath. When I found you in that canyon, when I brought you back here, I told myself I was just doing the right thing, helping someone who needed it, nothing more. He paused. But somewhere between that canyon and now something changed. You changed from someone I was protecting to someone I care about, someone important. Beatrice's pulse raced, but she stayed quiet, letting him finish. I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. I know you're still recovering from trauma and probably not thinking straight. But I also know that when Blackwell's men were in this house, when I thought they might hurt you, I was ready to die to stop that from happening. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt about Sarah, but because the thought of anything happening to you was unbearable. He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in the starlight. So here's what I'm asking. Stay. Not just for a few weeks. Stay for as long as you want. Help me run this ranch. Build something here with me. And maybe if time proves that what we're both feeling is real and not just circumstance, maybe we could... He stopped, struggling for words. Maybe we could be more than just two people surviving together. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. Calder. You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need. I just needed you to know where I stand. Needed you to know that if you stay, it won't be as a guest or as hired help. It'll be as...
This story
He
was
gestured
posted on the
helplessly.
channel west
As
of
something
Betrayal.
more.
Please
Something
do
I
not
don't have a name
repost
for
it
yet.
in any form.
She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his rough jaw. I already know my answer. You do. Yes. She smiled through her tears. 3 days ago, when you went through that door to face Blackwell, I realized something. I realized that if you died, I wouldn't just be sad. I'd be devastated. That this stranger who'd saved me had become someone I couldn't imagine being without. She moved closer to him. So yes, I'll stay. Not because I don't have anywhere else to go, but because there's nowhere else I want to be. Beatrice. Her name on his lips was half prayer, half wonder. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know if it's smart or sensible or if we're both just responding to trauma. But I know I care about you too. I know that when I look at the future now, you're in it, and I want to see where that leads." For a moment, they just stood there, his face in her hands, her eyes locked on his, then slowly, carefully giving her every chance to pull away. Calder leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative a question being asked, but when Beatrice pressed closer, when her arms went around his neck, the kiss deepened into something more certain, something that felt like a promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Calder rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the first morning. When you came out of the bedroom wearing my mother's dress and looked at me like I was someone worth trusting." "You are worth trusting. You're worth everything." She kissed him again, softer this time. "But we should take this slow. Make sure what we're feeling is real." "Agreed. Though, if I'm being honest, it already feels pretty damn real." "To me, too." They stood together in the starlight, holding each other, neither wanting to break the moment. Scout wandered up and pushed his nose between them, making them both laugh. "Jealous?" Calder asked the dog. Scout wagged his tail and returned to his spot by the door, satisfied that he'd reminded them of his presence. "We should sleep," Beatrice said reluctantly. "Tomorrow we need to ride to town for supplies. Your shoulder won't fix itself if you don't rest it properly." "Yes, ma'am." But he didn't move, didn't let her go. "Calder, just one more minute. Let me just hold you for one more minute." So she stayed her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safe, in a way she hadn't felt since her parents died. This man had fought for her, had bled for her, had opened his home and his heart to her. And now they were going to build something together, what exactly neither of them knew. But they'd figure it out day by day, side by side. Eventually they went inside, banking the fire, checking the doors and windows, out of habit, even though the danger had passed. Calder walked Beatrice to her bedroom door, his parents' old room, and kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that made her knees weak. "Sleep well," he murmured. "You too." But Beatrice lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, her fingers touching her lips where he'd kissed her. Everything had changed so fast. A week ago, she'd been a captive, facing a nightmare. Now she was free, safe, and falling for a cowboy who'd saved her life. Was it real? Or was she just clinging to the first kind person she'd found after trauma? She didn't have the answer, but she knew she wanted to find out. The next morning dawned bright and clear. They saddled horses, Calder's bay, and one of the gentler horses from Blackwell's gang, and rode toward town together. The journey took most of the morning, following a trail that wound through prairie and low hills. Calder pointed out landmarks, told her stories about the land, and Beatrice found herself falling in love with the harsh beauty of it all. When they crested the final rise and saw the town spread out below, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street, Beatrice felt a flutter of nervousness. "They're going to stare," Calder warned. "Everyone's heard what happened by now. Just try to ignore it." But ignoring it was impossible. The moment they rode into town, people stopped what they were doing to watch. Women whispered to each other behind their hands. Men nodded respectfully to Calder. Children stared openly at Beatrice, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Miss Holloway." A plump woman in a flour-dusted apron hurried out of the general store. "Oh, my dear, we've been so worried. When we heard what happened..." She pulled Beatrice into an embrace that smelled of cinnamon and kindness. "I'm Martha Thompson. My husband runs the store. We've been gathering supplies for you, clothes, personal items, everything you lost." "Mrs. Thompson, that's too generous." "Nonsense. It's the least we can do." She stepped back, her eyes glistening. "What you survived, what you both did, stopping those monsters, your heroes. Let us help you." More people approached the blacksmith, the saloon owner, the minister's wife, all offering condolences, congratulations, assistance. Sheriff Davis appeared from his office and dispersed the crowd with good-natured firmness. "Let them breathe, folks. They came for supplies, not a parade." He guided Calder and Beatrice toward the general store. "Martha's not exaggerating about the collection. Whole town pitched in. Got enough money to replace everything you lost and then some." Inside the store, Mrs. Thompson and two other women had assembled an impressive array of goods, several dresses in Beatrice's size, undergarments, a warm coat, boots, a hairbrush and mirror soap, and countless other necessities. On the counter sat a leather pouch, heavy with coins. "This is too much," Beatrice protested, overwhelmed. "It's exactly right," Mrs. Thompson
This
said
story was
firmly.
posted on
"You're
the channel
one of us
west
now,
of
dear.
Betrayal.
We take
Please
care
do
of
not
our own.
repost it in any form.
One of us." The words settled into Beatrice's heart like a warm stone. She'd spent so long feeling like an outsider, a city girl playing at frontier life. But these people were claiming her as their own. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you. I don't know how to—" "You already paid us back by stopping Blackwell," the sheriff said. "That gang's been terrorizing good folks for years. Now they're gone and we can all sleep easier. That's worth more than money." They spent the next hour loading supplies, flour, coffee, sugar, salt, ammunition tools to repair the ranch. The townsfolk kept adding items, refusing payment. "Call it a housewarming gift to us," the blacksmith said with a wink that made Beatrice blush and Calder scowl. As they prepared to leave, a young woman approached, barely 20, with honey-colored hair and nervous eyes. "Miss Holloway, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what—" "My sister. She was traveling from Kansas to California last year. Her wagon was attacked by the Blackwell gang. They took her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "We never found her, never knew what happened. But knowing that the men who took her are finally gone, that they can't hurt anyone else," her voice broke. "Thank you for ending it." Beatrice pulled the young woman into an embrace, her own tears flowing freely. "I'm so sorry about your sister, so sorry. She'd want me to thank you both." Sarah pulled back and looked at Calder. "My family's grateful, so grateful." As they rode out of town, Beatrice was silent, processing everything. The gratitude, the recognition, the weight of what they'd done. She'd never thought of herself as a hero. Heroes were people in books, not terrified school teachers who shot men to stay alive. But maybe heroes were just ordinary people who did what needed doing when the moment came. "You all right?" Calder asked, noticing her quiet. "I'm just thinking about Sarah Mitchell's sister, about all the people Blackwell hurt over the years, about how many lives were destroyed. Can't change the past, can only move forward." "I know, but it makes what we did feel more important, less about us surviving and more about stopping something evil." It was both, nothing wrong with that. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the horses laden with supplies, the afternoon sun warm on their backs. About halfway home, Calder pulled up short, his hand going to his gun. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, fear spiking immediately. "Rider, coming fast from the north." She saw him then, a single horseman pushing his mount hard, riding like the devil was chasing him. As he got closer, Beatrice recognized the young deputy who'd been with the sheriff. "Mr. Boone, Miss Holloway," he shouted, pulling up in a spray of dust. "Thank God I found you." "The sheriff sent me. There's been trouble." Calder's expression went hard. "What kind of trouble?" It's Slim, the one who ran from your ranch. He came back. Not to your place, to Jake Thornton's. Showed up this morning with 2 other men claiming Mr. Thornton helped you escape with Miss Holloway. They've got the whole family hostage. Jake, his wife, their 2 kids." The deputy's young face was pale with fear. "They're demanding Miss Holloway turn herself over by sundown or they start killing people." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Beatrice gripped her saddle horn, feeling sick. No, this is my fault. I have to—" "You're not going anywhere near them," Calder said flatly.
This story
He
was
turned to the
posted
deputy.
on the channel west
"Where's the
of
sheriff?"
Betrayal. Please do not
"Gathering men
repost
now.
it in
We'll
any
have
form.
maybe 8 or 9 guns, but Jake's ranch is open ground, no cover for an approach. If we ride in, they'll see us coming and start shooting hostages." "Then we don't ride in. We go in quiet." Calder was already thinking, already planning. Beatrice could see it in his eyes, the soldier he'd been during the war coming back to the surface. How much time until sundown? Maybe 4 hours. That's enough. "Deputy, you ride back and tell the sheriff to gather his men, but to wait for my signal. Tell him I know a way onto Jake's property that can't be seen from the house. We'll come in from the creek side." "Mr. Boone, your shoulder?" "My shoulder's fine. Now go." The deputy wheeled his horse and galloped back toward town. Calder turned to Beatrice, his expression gentle despite the urgency. I need you to ride to the ranch. Stay there with Scout bar the doors, and don't open them for anyone but me or the sheriff. Understand?" "No." Beatrice's voice was steady despite her fear. "No, Calder. Those people are in danger because of me, because Jake helped us. I can't hide while you risk your life again." "Beatrice, I'm coming with you. Don't argue." His jaw clenched. "This is different from defending the ranch. This is an active assault on armed men holding hostages. It's dangerous." "Everything out here is dangerous. You taught me that." She met his eyes. "You also taught me that running away doesn't solve anything. I'm coming. If they want me, they'll get me, but not the way they expect." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, but you follow my lead exactly. No heroics, no improvising. We do this smart or people die. Agreed?" "Agreed." They turned their horses and rode hard for the Bar T, taking the long way around to stay out of sight of the ranch house. Calder led them to a dry creek bed that wound through Jake's property, providing cover and concealment. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they dismounted and crept forward on foot, keeping low. Calder moved like a ghost despite his injured shoulder, and Beatrice tried to match his silence. When they got close enough, they could see the ranch house. 3 horses were tied out front. Through the window, Beatrice could make out figures inside Jake and his family, bound and terrified. 3 armed men guarded them. "That's more than just Slim," Calder whispered. "He found allies. This just got more complicated." "What's the plan?" He studied the scene, his mind working. "Sheriff and his men will approach from the front as a distraction. While the outlaws are focused on them, we slip in the back. I take out whoever's closest to the family while you get them free and out the back door. Then we hold position and wait for the sheriff to finish it. What if something goes wrong? Then we improvise." He looked at her. "You ready for this?" Beatrice thought about Jake and his family, thought about the young deputy's frightened face, thought about all the people Blackwell and his gang had hurt, all the lives they'd destroyed. She pulled out the pistol Calder had given her and checked that it was loaded. "I'm ready." They waited in the gathering shadows of the creek bed, listening to the minutes tick by. Beatrice's heart hammered so hard she was certain Calder could hear it. Her palms were slick with sweat despite the cooling evening air. Through the window of Jake's ranch house, she could see the silhouettes moving, the outlaws pacing, agitated, checking their weapons. One of them kept looking at the 2 children, a boy of maybe 10 and a girl no older than 7, and the way he looked at them made Beatrice's blood run cold. "They're getting nervous," Calder whispered. "Sun's almost down. They'll start making good on their threats soon if we don't move." As if summoning them, the sound of approaching horses drifted across the prairie. The sheriff and his posse right on schedule. Beatrice saw the outlaws inside the house react immediately, rushing to the windows shouting at each other. One of them, Slim, she was almost certain grabbed Jake's wife by the hair and dragged her toward the door. "That's our cue," Calder said. "Stay low, stay quiet, and for God's sake, don't get yourself killed." They moved together through the creek bed, using the terrain and the dying light as cover. The back of Jake's house faced away from the main approach, and with all 3 outlaws focused on the sheriff's arrival, no one was watching the rear entrance. Calder tested the back door carefully. Unlocked. Jake never locked his doors, trusting in the isolation of his ranch for security. They slipped inside into a narrow hallway that opened into the main room where the hostages were being held. From their position, Beatrice could see everything. Jake sat in a chair, his hands bound behind him, blood crusting on his temple where someone had struck him. His wife Mary stood near the front door, still held by Slim, a gun pressed to her ribs. The 2 children were huddled in the corner, their young faces streaked with tears. And 2 other men, rough-looking characters with the dead eyes of career criminals, stood at the windows with rifles. "Listen up, Sheriff," Slim shouted through the door. "You got 1 minute to send out Beatrice Holloway or Mary Thornton. Here gets a bullet in her gut." "Now, son, let's talk about this," Sheriff Davis called back, his voice calm and reasonable. "You're only making things worse for yourself. Let these good people go, and we can work something out." "The hell with that Blackwell was my friend. He took me in when I had nothing, gave me a place, and that bitch got him killed." Slim's voice cracked with emotion. Grief, rage, fear, all tangled together. "She owes a debt, and I'm collecting." Slim's barely holding it together, Calder breathed in Beatrice's ear. That makes him dangerous. We need to move now before he does something stupid. He pointed to the children, then to Beatrice, his meaning clear. Get them out first. Then he gestured to himself and mimed shooting. He'd take out the outlaws while she evacuated the family. Beatrice nodded, her mouth dry as dust. She'd never been so terrified in her life, but she couldn't let that stop her. Those children needed her. Jake and Mary needed her. Calder counted down silently on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. He burst into the room with his rifle raised. Drop your weapons. The two men at the windows spun around, bringing their rifles to bear, but Calder was faster. His first shot took down the man on the left, the rifle's crack deafening in the enclosed space. His second shot went wide as his wounded shoulder betrayed him, and the second outlaw returned fire. Beatrice didn't wait to see if Calder was hit. She ran for the children, grabbing them both and pulling them toward the back hallway, even as chaos erupted around her. Slim screamed something incomprehensible and shoved Mary toward the sheriff's men, raising his pistol toward Calder's exposed back. No. Beatrice raised her own pistol and fired without thinking. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make Slim turn toward her, his face twisted with recognition and rage. You! He fired. The bullet whined past Beatrice's head so close she felt the wind of its passage. She shoved the children behind her and fired again, this time hitting Slim in the leg. He went down with a howl of pain. The second outlaw had Calder pinned behind an overturned table. Bullets tore through the wood splinters, flying. Through the front door, Beatrice could see the sheriff and his men trying to get a clear shot without hitting anyone inside. "Jake!" Calder shouted. "Your rifle! Where is it?" "Above the fireplace!" Jake yelled back, struggling against his bonds. Beatrice looked. The rifle was mounted on wooden pegs close enough to reach if she moved fast, but that meant crossing the line of fire. She made the decision in a heartbeat. "Stay down," she ordered the children, then ran. The outlaw at the window saw her and swung his rifle toward her. Calder popped up from behind the table and shot him square in the chest. The man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Beatrice grabbed Jake's rifle and tossed it to Calder, who caught it one-handed. He worked the lever, chambering around just as Slim managed to get to his feet. Blood streaming from his leg, his face contorted with pain and fury. "I'll kill all of you!" Slim screamed, raising his pistol with a shaking hand. Sheriff Davis appeared in the doorway behind him. "Drop it, boy." Slim spun, and for a terrible moment Beatrice thought he'd shoot the sheriff. But Tom Davis was an old hand. His pistol was already drawn and aimed with the steadiness of decades of experience. "Last chance," the sheriff said quietly. "Drop the gun, or I drop you." Something in Slim's eyes changed. The fury drained away, replaced by the terrified realization of a young man who'd made catastrophically bad choices and now faced the consequences. His pistol clattered to the floor, and he sank down after it, sobbing. "It's over," Sheriff Davis said, stepping into the room. His deputies followed, weapons drawn, checking the fallen outlaws. "Everyone all right?" Jake's wife, Mary, had collapsed against the doorframe, shaking with relief and shock. The children ran to her, crying. Jake himself was being cut free by one of the deputies, rubbing his wrists where the ropes had bitten deep. Beatrice lowered her pistol with shaking hands. She'd done it. They'd done it. Everyone was safe. Then she looked at Calder and saw the blood. "You're hit," she said, horror flooding through her. He glanced down at his side where red was spreading across his shirt. "Just a graze. I've had worse." "That's more than a graze." She rushed to him, pressing her hand against the wound. The blood was hot and wet, too much blood.
This story was posted on the channel west of Betrayal.
I need to make sure everyone
Please
else
do
is
not
all right
repost
first.
it in any form.
But his face had gone pale, and he swayed slightly on his feet. "Calder Boone, you stubborn fool, sit down before you fall down." Mary Thornton's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with the authority of a woman who'd raised 2 children and run a ranch. She might have been a hostage 5 minutes ago, but she was back in command now. "Deputy Morrison, ride for Doc Matthews. Jake, get the medical supplies. Miss Holloway, keep pressure on that wound." The next hour was a blur. Doc Matthews arrived and patched Calder up. It was indeed more than a graze. The bullet had carved a furrow through his side, but it hadn't hit anything vital. The old doctor worked with practiced efficiency while Beatrice held Calder's hand, trying not to think about how close she'd come to losing him. The outlaws who'd partnered with Slim were both dead. Slim himself sat in the corner under guard, his leg bandaged, his face slack with shock and defeat. He looked even younger than Beatrice had thought, couldn't have been more than 19. Just a boy who'd fallen in with bad men and made terrible choices. "What'll happen to him?" Beatrice asked Sheriff Davis quietly. "Trial. Probably hanging given what he's done. Or prison if the judge is feeling merciful." The sheriff's expression was grave. "I know he's young, but he held a family hostage and threatened to kill them. That's not something the law takes lightly." "I know. It's just—" She looked at Slim, at his tear-streaked face. "He could have been someone different, if he'd made different choices." "We all could be someone different, Miss Holloway, but we're defined by the choices we actually make, not the ones we could have made." The sheriff touched his hat brim to her. "You made good choices today. Brave choices. Saved lives." After the sheriff and his men had taken Slim away, after the bodies had been removed and statements given, Jake insisted that Beatrice and Calder stay for supper. Mary wouldn't hear any arguments, and truth be told, neither of them had the energy to argue. They sat around the Thornton family table, battered and worn from years of use but scrubbed clean and set with simple but hearty food. The children had recovered from their ordeal with the resilience of youth and were chattering excitedly about the adventure, much to their parents' chagrin. "Some adventure," Jake muttered, but his eyes were wet with gratitude as he looked at Calder and Beatrice. "You two saved our lives today, all our lives. I don't know how to thank you." "You already thanked us," Calder said, "by writing to warn us 3 days ago, by bringing the sheriff. We're even." "Like hell we're even," Jake's weathered face was serious. "You both risked your lives for my family. That's a debt I can never fully repay. But I can start by saying this. You need anything, anything at all. You come to me. Cattle horses, hay for winter, help with repairs. Whatever you need, it's yours." "We appreciate that, Jake," Beatrice said softly. "But truly we were just doing what anyone would do." "No." Mary reached across the table and took Beatrice's hand. "Not anyone. Most people would have run, would have hidden, would have let someone else handle it. You both ran toward danger to save people you care about. That's rare. That's special." The children nodded solemnly, and little Emma, the 7-year-old, slipped from her chair and wrapped her arms around Beatrice's neck. "Thank you for saving us," she whispered. "You're the bravest lady I ever met." Beatrice held the child close, tears streaming down her face. "You're very welcome, sweetheart." As they rode home in the darkness, Calder swaying slightly in the saddle from blood loss and exhaustion, Beatrice kept close to him, ready to catch him if he fell. The moon had risen, painting the prairie in silver, and the night air was cool and clean. "We make a good team," Calder said, finally, his voice rough with fatigue. "You and me. We do. I was terrified today. When you ran across that room when that outlaw aimed at you, I thought my heart would stop. I felt the same when I saw you'd been shot." He looked at her, his face half in shadow, half in moonlight. "I love you, Beatrice. I know it's too soon to say it. I know we barely know each other, but I love you. And I need you to know that before anything else happens, before the universe gets another chance to tear us apart." Beatrice's breath caught. "Calder, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand that what I feel for you isn't just gratitude or trauma or circumstance. It's real. You're real, and I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth making you happy." She pulled her horse close to his and reached for his hand. "I love you too. I think I started falling for you the moment you said, 'No one takes you again.' When you looked at me like I was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth everything." She lifted his hand to her lips and kissed his knuckles. "I love you, Calder Boone, and I'm not going anywhere." They rode the rest of the way in silence, hands clasped, hearts full. When they reached the ranch, Scout bounded out to greet them, tail wagging furiously, and the sight of home, their home, made Beatrice's chest tight with emotion. Calder dismounted carefully, favoring his wounded side, and helped Beatrice down. They stood in the moonlight, exhausted and battered but alive, looking at the ranch house with its patched bullet holes and new windows. "Marry me," Calder said suddenly. Beatrice stared at him. "What?" "Marry me." I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other a week, but I also know I don't want to spend another day without you. I want to wake up every morning and see you in my kitchen. I want to rebuild this ranch with you. I want to have children who'll run through these fields and ride these horses and learn that love is worth fighting for." He cupped her face in his hands. "Marry me, Beatrice. Make this house a home. Make me the luckiest man in Texas." She should say no, should say it was too fast, too crazy, too impulsive. Should say they needed time to be sure to know each other better to make certain this wasn't just trauma and circumstance. But when she looked into his dark eyes, when she felt his hands gentle on her face, when she thought about the life they could build together, all the reasonable objections died on her lips. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was fierce and tender, all at once, full of promise and hope, and a future that stretched out before them like the prairie itself, vast and sometimes harsh, but beautiful beyond measure. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in town with half the county in attendance. Sheriff Davis stood as witness. Jake Thornton gave Beatrice away, tears streaming down his weathered face. Mary and the other ranch wives had made her a dress of white cotton with lace at the collar, simple but lovely. Calder wore his best suit, his arm no longer in a sling, though the doctor had warned him his shoulder would ache in cold weather for the rest of his life. "Small price to pay," Calder had said, looking at Beatrice, and she'd known exactly what he meant. The ceremony was short and sweet. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about building lives together in a harsh land, about faith and courage, and the bonds that held communities together. When Calder slipped the simple gold band on Beatrice's finger, his grandmother's ring kept all these years, she felt something click into place inside her, like a key turning in a lock. This was where she belonged. Not Boston with its memories of loss. Not Fort Worth with its unfulfilled promise. Here, with this man, on this land. The reception was held at the ranch with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. The ranch wives had outdone themselves, roasted beef and pork, fresh bread, and preserves, pies, and cakes of every variety. Someone brought a fiddle and another a guitar, and soon music filled the air. Beatrice danced with her new husband under the stars, his arms strong around her, his heart beating against hers. Around them, their friends and neighbors celebrated these people who'd welcomed her so completely after she'd lost everything. "Happy," Calder murmured in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good, because I plan on making you this happy every day for the rest of our lives." "That's a tall order, Mr. Boone." "Then I better get started, Mrs. Boone." The sound of her new name made her smile. Mrs. Boone. Beatrice Boone. She was no longer the lost schoolteacher from Boston. She was a rancher's wife, a survivor, a woman who'd looked death in the face and chosen to live to love to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, Calder swept Beatrice up in his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. Inside, everything was clean and repaired, ready for their new life together. The bullet holes were patched, the furniture mended, fresh curtains hanging in the windows. They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to Beatrice's eyes. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow. They learned each other's bodies the way they'd learned each other's hearts, slowly, carefully, with reverence and joy. Afterward, lying tangled together in the bed that had been his parents' Calder traced patterns on Beatrice's shoulder and said, "I used to think this house was haunted by memories, by grief, by all the things I'd lost. And now..."
This story was
Now it feels
posted on
alive
the
again,
channel west of
like it's
Betrayal.
been waiting all these
Please
years
do not
for you to walk through
repost
the
it
door
in
and
any
wake
form.
it up. He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for that. For making this a home again instead of just a place I survive in. Thank you for saving my life. For giving me a reason to keep living. We saved each other. That's what love does." The months that followed were hard work, but filled with joy. They rose before dawn and worked until dusk, tending cattle, mending fences, preparing for winter. Beatrice learned to rope and brand, to read the weather, to shoot straight and ride hard. She taught Calder to read better. He could manage simple things, but had never had much schooling. And sometimes in the evenings, they'd sit by the fire and she'd read to him from books she'd ordered from back east. Jake Thornton became a regular visitor, often bringing his family for Sunday supper. The children adored Beatrice and would beg her for stories about Boston, about the ocean they'd never seen, about the world beyond the prairie. Sheriff Davis stopped by monthly to check on them and share news from town. Slim had been sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. The judge had shown mercy given his youth and the fact that he hadn't actually killed anyone during the hostage situation. It was harsh but fair, and Beatrice hoped the boy would come out better than he went in. Winter came hard that year with blizzards that lasted days and temperatures that dropped so low the water in the well froze solid. But inside their snug house, with a fire roaring and Calder's arms around her, Beatrice had never felt warmer. It was during one of those long winter nights with snow piling up outside and wind howling through the eaves that Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't been certain until the morning sickness started. Now sitting at the kitchen table with Calder across from her, she wondered how to tell him. They'd talked about children, of course, but in an abstract future sense. This was real, immediate. "You're quiet tonight," Calder observed, setting down his coffee cup. "Something on your mind?" "Yes." She took a breath. "I have news. Good news, I think. I hope." His expression grew alert, concerned. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Calder just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then a smile broke across his features like sunrise, bright and beautiful and full of wonder. "A baby," he breathed. "We're having a baby. In about 6 months, if I'm calculating right." He was out of his chair in an instant, pulling her up and spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. Scout barked excitedly, caught up in the energy, even though he didn't understand why. "We're having a baby," Calder shouted to the ceiling, to the walls, to the universe itself. Then he set Beatrice down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Should I have done that? Did I hurt you, the baby?" "We're fine," she assured him, laughing at his worried expression. "I'm not made of glass." "I know, I just—" He placed his hand on her still flat stomach, his eyes full of awe. "There's a person in there. Our person. A baby we made together." "Yes. I'm going to be a father." "Yes." He looked at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "My parents would have loved this, would have loved you, would have been over the moon about a grandchild. I wish I could have known them. They would have adored you, my mother especially. She always said this house needed the sound of children's laughter again." He pulled Beatrice close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Thank you. For this. For everything. For choosing me, choosing this life, choosing to build a future here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. No one else I'd rather build that future with." The baby came in late spring after a long and difficult labor that had Calder pacing holes in the floor and Doc Matthews muttering about stubborn first-time mothers. But when Beatrice finally delivered a healthy, squalling boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determined chin, all the pain was forgotten. They named him Thomas Henderson Boone. Thomas, after Sheriff Davis, who'd become like family to them, and Henderson after the wagon driver who died trying to protect Beatrice. It seemed right to honor both men who'd played such important roles in bringing them together. Calder held his son with shaking hands and streaming tears, this big, rough cowboy reduced to awed silence by 7 pounds of red-faced infant. "Hello, Tommy," he whispered. "Welcome home." Beatrice watched her husband fall in love with their son and felt her heart expand with more happiness than she'd thought possible. This was what she'd survived for, this moment, this family, this life. The years that followed were full of the ordinary magic that makes up a life well lived. They expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land when it became available. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who reminded Calder of himself at that age, rough around the edges, but good-hearted and eager to learn. Tommy grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses and books in equal measure. When he was 3, they started teaching him his letters, and by 5 he was reading on his own. He had his mother's love of learning and his father's quiet strength, and both parents watched him grow with fierce pride. They had 2 more children in the years that followed, a daughter named Sarah, after Calder's cousin, who had her father's stubborn streak and her mother's quick mind, and another son they called Jake, who was sweet-tempered and gentle despite his strong young body. The ranch prospered. Triple B cattle became known throughout the territory for their quality, and Calder's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread. They weren't wealthy, not by city standards, but they had enough. More importantly, they had each other. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Calder and Beatrice would sit on the porch and watch the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Sometimes they'd talk about the past, about that terrifying week when they'd first met. Sometimes they'd plan for the future, for the ranch they were building, for the legacy they'd leave their children. But mostly they'd just sit in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts full, grateful for every ordinary moment of their extraordinary life together. One evening, 10 years after that moonless night, when Beatrice had first escaped into the prairie, she sat on that same porch, watching Tommy. Now 11, teaching 7-year-old Sarah how to rope a fence post while 5-year-old Jake cheered them on. Scout, now an old dog, but still alert, supervised from his spot in the shade. Calder emerged from the barn and came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. They watched their children together, this family they'd built from tragedy and terror, from love and courage and sheer stubborn determination. "You ever regret it?" Calder asked quietly. "Giving up the life you could have had? Teaching in a real school, living in a real town, having a civilized existence?" Beatrice turned to look at him. This man who'd saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. His hair was graying at the temples now, and new lines creased his face, but his dark eyes still held the same intensity, the same love that had made her say yes when he'd asked her to marry him. "Not once," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This is the life I was meant to have. This ranch, this family, you. Even after everything we went through, everything you suffered. Especially after all that, because it taught me what really matters. Not safety or comfort or the approval of society, but love. Real, fierce, unbreakable love." She squeezed his hand. "You taught me that, Calder. When you looked at a terrified stranger and said no one takes you again, you taught me that I was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth loving. You were always worth all that. You just needed someone to show you. And you were the someone." She leaned against him and his arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm and safe. "I love you. I love this life. I love every hard-won moment of it. I love you too. More now than the day we married. And I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." Tommy successfully lassoed the fence post and Sarah cheered while Jake jumped up and down with excitement. The children's laughter carried across the prairie, bright and joyful, exactly what this ranch needed. Exactly what two broken people had needed to become whole again. As the sun set over the Triple B ranch, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Beatrice Holloway Boone stood in the circle of her husband's arms and knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Not the place she'd been born, not the destination she'd planned to reach, but home in the truest sense of the word. She'd escaped outlaws and terror. She'd found love and courage. She'd built a family and a legacy. And through it all, Calder had kept his promise. No one had taken her again. No one ever would. Because she belonged here to this land, to this man, to this beautiful, hard-won life. And nothing in heaven or earth could change that. The stars began to appear overhead one by one, the same stars that had watched over her that desperate night 10 years ago. But now she looked at them without fear, without desperation. Now she looked at them and saw only beauty, only promise, only the infinite possibilities of a future she'd built with her own 2 hands and the help of a cowboy who'd taught her what it meant to truly live.
This story was posted on the channel
Calder
west
said
of
softly.
Please
Let's get
do not
these kids
repost
inside
it
and
in
fed
any
before
form.
they convince themselves they don't need supper. Good luck with that. They're Boones. They're always hungry. He laughed, that low, warm sound that still made her heart skip, and called to their children. They came running, all 3 of them racing to see who could reach the porch first, and the house filled with their voices, their laughter, their love. And Beatrice stood in the doorway of her home, her real home, and smiled at the life she'd found in the most unexpected place with the most unexpected man. She'd come west looking for a fresh start. She'd found so much more. She'd found everything.